Hey, Danny, we've started working together on a really interesting project about 5 months ago,
hmm
and I thought it would be important to come down here to the HiCam podcasting studio and talk a little bit about what we've been doing the last few months. It's been a tremendous amount of work and a tremendous amount of joy, and I can't imagine where we're going to be in another year. So I wanted to have a conversation with you and kind of unpack those things. So I thought maybe we'd start with what's the name of the project
hmm
that we're doing and what is it?
hmm Yeah, so we're working on building out the Austin STEM Center, and for me, it's a facility that is unique, something that we haven't really seen before, and obviously there's a problem we're collectively looking to solve, and we're doing something that is different. Um, and the goal is to be a high impact facility to support STEM education in a wide variety of ways. Part of the reason that I'm here is because I think I've got a unique perspective on how to create impact. And really a lot of my time and my effort, my career has been focused on, it's creating impact, but primarily through inspiration. And when I find that when people are inspired, the amount of time, energy, and effort it takes to help educate that person goes down dramatically because they begin to be very self-motivated.
So, really focusing on lighting that fire, and it's not up to us to light, it's up to us to expose them to a breadth
It's
of
it's it's
experiences.
up to us to build the environment
Okay,
that lights the fire.
that makes sense. Um, More specifically,
Mhm.
I've been really fascinated as we've been talking and getting to know each other these last few months. Um, there is our two worlds, right? And so you were East Bay, and I was San Francisco Peninsula, and I was generally maker spaces and more middle school,
Mhm.
that age, and you were in the East Bay, and you were doing. How would you describe kind of your sphere?
So there's a lot of focus on workforce development. So
Right.
all of my efforts in this field started via workforce development, and was really because something that I didn't really see the value in when I was growing up, but I had continual exposure to tools and building, and a lot of it was doing hard work in the desert, which is not a fun place to do the building work, especially when you're outside building buildings that don't have air conditioning yet. Um, and I feel like I really took it for granted growing up that I had that exposure. And it wasn't until my early to mid 20s that one I realized those were very valuable skills to have, but two that the way in which our culture, at least in the United States, has evolved has been reducing those opportunities. So if you didn't have the dad, supporting tinkering in the garage, then there's so many people that don't know how to use a tape measure, that don't know how to use a saw, that don't know how things work, because of the reduction in and focus on shop class inside education.
Would you say that it is the skills to be able to understand and wield those tools, or that plus looking at a building as a system and understanding it's not intimidating, that they don't come out of a black hole, that a building is sheetrock, studs, plumbing, roofing?
Mhm.
Um, and in that journey, did you start to see buildings differently as you picked up tools?
I definitely saw buildings differently as I picked up tools, and it's much more of the systems thinking approach that I got from directly building things,
Right.
and more specifically for residential houses. So, the house is absolutely a system, and there's a process to it. A superpower that I have developed over time is, I'll call it X-ray vision. I can look into this wall.
Right.
I know what's behind it. I know how it gets assembled. I can, I could even pinpoint, okay, I can see based on where the outlet's at, I can tell you where the stud is. Based on my knowledge of stud layout, I can tell you where the next stud is. And, knowing what a screw schedule is or a nailing schedule for the sheetrock on that wall, I can then approximate, okay, there's probably a screw right here and there's another one right here, 6 to 8 inches higher, and there's another one here. And just being able to stare at something and saying, okay, I can take this thing apart in my head and I can put it back together. And for me, there's a ton of value in learning how to use a tool and how to apply the tool. But when you can do that times 50, times 100, times an entire building, then you begin to understand a systems approach to things.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, because we've just started to have some work on our house done, and I'm just starting to understand the systems and see behind a wall for the first time, not x-ray vision.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it occurs to me when we're looking at the outlets over there that the outlet has to be on the side of a stud. It's not just floating in space, because sheetrock is ornamental or crumbly. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's not explicit, but it's 99% of the time. So if I remodeled something,
Right.
I can put an outlet floating in the middle of the wall, no problem.
Okay.
But typically it's attached to some sort of a structural member within the wall itself.
So a builder or an architect would space the outlets so they are on the studs that are running vertically, but it's allowable to go ahead and put one in space. So you make the assumption, I'm seeing the outlet, it's about this tall from the ground. It's probably on a stud. The studs are every 18 inches or 16 typically. Inches. And then you can literally map out entire wall because you just glanced at an outlet. Is
yes,
that right?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's really helpful for simple things like hanging a picture when something's got weight to it. So maybe a picture's not the best example if you're going to put a TV monitor on the wall.
Okay.
And you can go out and buy a stud finder, which is a valuable tool. A lot of stud finders, at least ones that are $50 and less, don't really do a great job in the first place.
Okay.
But having the same power in your brain as the stud finder. So knowing how to do that, to knock
right
in the right location and understand, okay, but I can hear the difference of here versus here.
Right.
And if you need to, you start where that there's a stud, either right next to a door, right next to the outlet, etc. And then you can measure your 16 off that and then to confirm, okay, yep, that doesn't sound hollow there. It sounds solid. Okay. Therefore, the stud's right there.
Tell me more about workforce development, because it's really new to me. And when we took that tour of the East Bay in California, meeting all the different, it's not centers, what would you call them when you had set up those?
Fab labs.
They're fab labs. And I think there's a perception with people who are outside the makerspace and fab lab community that, they're the same. It's a place you make something. After visiting some of your fab labs and understanding stories of some of the people who have, what was the one woman who came in with an English major?
Kara, yeah.
Okay. Tell me about her.
Sure. Kara was a student at Laney College, was the first community college fab lab I built. The first educational institution that I worked for was them. And it took me 6 years of working there and politicking in order to get them to understand the value of what a fab lab would be. And then spent time building it. And kind of my approach, because I took something that was just a big passion of mine, a big interest of mine. I said, wait a minute, we put enough of these fun tools, engaging tools in a room and give people a really high level of freedom and access. They're going to then find the drive. They're going to find the thing that motivates them to do the next thing. And really it's not the antithesis of most education, but a lot of it is, it's a very different approach,
right? Because
we already know what the beginning point looks like, and we know the end point, and we have everything mapped out in between of what you need to learn in order to get to the end. And, my goal and my approach with that work was not to put a linear path in front of someone and say, here's how to gain the knowledge you want.
Right.
Because that, it doesn't allow for a lot of freedom. It's a very restrictive approach. And so within the fab labs that I designed, it was really just a lot of tools, many of which you saw in the other areas of the college. But there was a machine here in wood tech, there's a machine here in machining, there's a machine here in the carpentry department, et cetera, that we then put in the room removing all the restrictions that it takes to access and use them in the first place. And so my approach that I developed, because I turned it into a career of developing these kind of facilities, was that I would first engage, do all the real hard leg work of convincing people there's value here, then dealing with all the bureaucracy, the budgeting, the purchasing, working with architects and contractors, which can always be fun, and it's 10x fun when you're doing it in the public sector than versus the private sector. But I would build the facility and then hire on students essentially to staff the facility. So every person who's worked in the Fab Labs, aside from me, was a student of the school first. And then as time went on, as we got somewhat established in the facilities, I began looking elsewhere and said, my goal here is not to be the guy that then sits here and operates this place day in, day out. One, because I had greater ambitions for making more money. There's a cap involved in working for an institution. And I saw that wasn't going to ultimately lead me where I wanted to go, but also because I was able to then develop the next facility or find the next opportunity and then go repeat the process. And so I worked and I did a lot of the initial development work. Hired on my first student, who then ended up supporting me as the number 2 role in running the facility as a full-time position. And then I slowly phased myself out of that. And so we'd always bring in student technicians. As I stepped out to go concentrate on building another one, I stayed on as an advisor, but I'm no longer involved in day-to-day operations. And so then my number 2 turns into the number 1 in the facility. Then one of the most engaged student technicians that we had ended up getting hired on as the number 2 in that role. And then this woman, Kara, that we just mentioned, she was another student, and she was a little more unique. Jimmy, who was my first number 2, he moved on. He decided to move on to something else. And so now Rick, who was the number 2, moved into the number 1 position, but still needed the support role. And, normally it was, okay, we'd take the student techs that were looking for a career of sorts, and then they would then step in and be hired on as a full-time role in the facility. Kara was a very unique person because she had actually never stepped foot in the facility before. But she heard that we were hiring, and she's like, well, I need to make some money. And, the institution wasn't willing to pay a lot of money. So we were limited to who we couldn't just go do a broad search and be like, okay, we're going to bring the most qualified person in here to do this job. But she stepped up, showed a strong initiative and said, wow, this is really interesting to me. And then, convinced us to hire her. So she came in as a number 2. She was on her second year of community college. She was an English major. So her plan was to leave the community college to go on to a 4-year university somewhere and major in English. Her time in the Fab Lab, without much technical background, getting up to that point, inspired her to the point where then she decided to change her major.
Wow.
Shifted away from an English major, wanted to go into engineering. And then ended up applying for Boston University to their mechanical engineering program. Left the Fab Lab, went off to go complete that degree. It was so wonderful seeing her coming back around Christmas time and other holidays. And she comes in and she's like, "Hey, this place blows them out of the water because the approach here is completely different than what they have there. Even though they've got 100x the square footage, they've got 50x the budget." They've got plenty of full-time people that are staffing and running that, their supportive facilities for mechanical engineering, but there wasn't this ideology or this perspective that the goal here is to get people excited and interested in the work in the first place. It was, you're here for a reason. We're going to put you on the assembly line. Start here, learn this, then learn that, then learn that, and then you're going to achieve the goal we set out for you, which is to get the degree.
There were no English majors at that school wandering in and falling in love with
exactly. That environment wasn't there to support that. It's there to support people who know what they want and they're willing to follow the instructions and the path laid out for them. With Kara, Once she graduated, she came back to the Bay Area. She ended up getting a job with a large 3D printing company. And so she helped do a lot of stuff for them. I think she was a little bit on the technical, the machines themselves, because she took all of her knowledge in mechanical engineering and applied that. And then she worked in the private sector, I think, for about 5 years. And then an opportunity came up for a teaching position for advanced manufacturing, or more specifically additive manufacturing, which is the technical term for 3D printing,
Right.
at a community college in San Jose area.
Okay.
And she came on as an adjunct role. She was qualified. She had enough of the background. She had the degree. She had the stamps that said, okay, you're qualified to do this work. And then she stepped into that role, didn't realize that much of the program was not very well designed in the first place. And so she spent about 2 years in an adjunct role rebuilding that entire program.
Wow.
And this is someone who was 25 at the time, with not a lot of industry experience, but she had this initiative and this drive to say, okay, but in addition to teaching the technical skills required, we also want to inspire the people in the first place.
Right.
And so the teaching approach changes when the goal is not fully understanding all the technical aspects you need to understand. It's how do we find the right opening for this person to say, wow, this is interesting. Some people might be interested in the programming and coding side of it. Some people might be interested in just the output. Some people are interested in the material science that goes into it.
Right.
And I'm very happy to report back that she was overlooked for a full-time tenured position initially. And then the college quickly realized they made a mistake. And then she's now full-time tenure.
Wow.
And coming from an English major, wandering into a small 900 square foot fab lab that I built at a community college, and now she's rebuilt the additive manufacturing program, and now she's setting her sights on rebuilding a robotics and automation program as well.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like the approach that I'm hearing is very much we don't want to have linear exposure. First you do this, then you do this, then you do this. You want to have a shop or a fab lab set up with something like a shop steward. So if a person has an interest in something, that they can just walk right up to that machine and say, this is where I'm interested, and start to engage there. And because that machine relates to all the other things that we want the person to learn, it's more like a circle. The person's in the center, they just parachuted in and they wander over here, and that will naturally lead to the other parts of the circle, even if they're kind of jumping across. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And one of the major things that I decided I wanted to solve for was, I was never a big fan of the Disneyland model. Here's this amazing thing over here. You get to go once a year on a field trip to go visit the thing, get really excited about something, and then go back to the classroom where you've got none of it.
Yeah.
And so that's where, the Fab Lab model really came in. It's like, we come here, get excited, and it ended up being an incentive for bringing students into the college, because you had to be a student of the college in order to use the space, but it was free and full access as long as you're a student. And we got, ended up at the multiple colleges I built, we had a number of people that enrolled in college to get access.
Wow.
And some of these were retired professionals. Some of them were high school students. Others were people that were looking for a career opportunity. And the Fab Lab was the thing that drew them in the first place. And even some of them, like, I would just tell people, like, hey, just go sign up for an online class. You don't even have to do anything in person. Just sign up for online. Then you're a student. Then you get access.
The mix of ages in the room, and then myself coming from the makerspace background, but I think one thing that might be similar is the interesting conversations that happen between people. And so if you have a college where, if you're enrolled at all, this Fab Lab becomes something that's accessible to you. You're not just coming in and learning the tools, being scaffolded by the shop steward, but also some pretty amazing conversations happen with cross-pollination.
Very much so. And that's, I've developed facilities for middle school, for high school, and community colleges is the place where I was drawn to the most because of the diversity of ages and backgrounds.
Right.
Because you can have, anybody's allowed essentially to enroll in classes. and show up at that institution for whatever reason they want. Whether it be a high school student who doesn't know what they want to do yet, and they're trying to figure that out. It'd be someone who is very dedicated and says, I know this is the stepping stone to get me to the next step, to get me into the four-year university. So that's why I'm here. You get transitioning professionals that were doing something else in life and then decide, okay, I want a new career. So they show up at community college. One of the greatest joys that I got is many times we would see students that graduated from UC Berkeley, that graduated from Stanford, that graduated from UCLA,
Wow.
coming back to the institution, not specifically for the Fab Lab, but they would definitely be users there. But they said, I went and got a degree and realized either A, there was no fulfillment in the work,
Right.
or B, it was not marketable skills. And it doesn't matter if it comes from UC Berkeley. If you get a degree in poetry from UC Berkeley, there's not a lot of career opportunities available to you.
Right.
Another one of my student technicians that turned into a lab manager, that was his path. He went to UC Berkeley for poetry, and then he left that. He ended up working in tech, and then he decided that he wanted to enroll in machining. And so, like, our machining department as a whole was a place that usually 50% of the students in the program had 4-year degrees.
Wow.
But they were showing back up to learn the technical aspects of the machining part because that gave them a lot more opportunity for career choices.
Right. And that does not diminish their first love of poetry or a major, but it might have been nice knowing going in that you could have started in the Fab Lab and then done some poetry or whatever your interest is on the side. Yeah, when we did the tour of the East Bay, I was impressed because the Fab Labs were still going strong. The culture was strong. How many years ago was that?
I was just looking. I had a picture pop up on Facebook today that showed like 10 years ago.
Wow.
This was
So
taken.
a decade later.
So at least a decade later, yeah.
Wow. That's a very strong approach. Why don't we shift it over to, when did we start talking? In May?
Yeah.
5 months ago?
I think May was the first time where you gave me a call and said, hey, there's an exciting new project going on here.
Yeah. How did I describe it to you?
There's a guy willing to fund a massive makerspace, and we're talking about buildings in tens of thousands of square feet.
Okay. Yeah. I believe, and we'll go ahead and unpack kind of the origin story of ASC. I feel like it would be fun to maybe jump forward just a little bit. 2 months ago, you and Peter were taking off, like we were all going to a restaurant, but we took a couple different cars. And so you jumped with him into a car and then asked him a question, and then he had a response. I think that might be a good place.
Sure. Yeah.
start.
I mean, my number one question for anybody doing big, interesting things is, what's your motivation? Why are you doing this in the first place?
Right.
Because I personally want, if I'm getting involved with a project, I want to know what the motivations are, because then at least I can kind of tailor my work product towards, hey, we're having the impact that you intended here.
Right.
But also understanding people's motivations in the first place really helps you get in there, see through their eyes, get in their brain a little bit. And I posed that very simple question of, why are you doing this?
What was the answer?
It was probably the most succinct, short answer I've gotten to that kind of question I've asked anybody.
Yeah.
And it was, I see big problems with the state of STEM education. I don't think anybody's going to fix it, because it would be fixed already. And I'm willing to invest the millions of dollars that I am in getting this thing going, because I see money as energy, and energy is just potential. And so he's willing to put his energy and his potential energy behind something like this.
What are the deliverables in front of us to help solve the problem?
I think that's actually one of the biggest things we've been trying to unpack through the entire project is really defining, like, what is success. And anytime I get engaged in projects like this, the first question I ask, which is typically the hardest to get answers to, is, what is the definition of success? And it's important for everyone to have a definition of success.
Right.
Because when anybody would walk up to me and say, hey, we're interested in doing a Fab Lab at our school, I'm like, okay, but what is the purpose? What do you think it's going to do for you?
Mhm.
Because I want to understand what you expect from what we're doing. Um, and Peter's been very great in kind of giving us collectively the role to figure that out
Mhm.
rather than defining it for us and handing it off. I think our job would actually be a little bit easier if he handed it off and said, this is what I want you to build. Now, it's very possible that you or I or others on the team might not be on the team if we were given that very direct, that very strict directive.
Right.
Because it's, I want to bring my influence to a thing. And if I just say, okay,
Mhm.
it's what you said it is. Yes, I need money and I need work. And so I'll do the thing, but I'm not going to invest my heart and my soul into this
Right.
project necessarily because it's not my flavor, my influence. So,
What
I think it's still very, very much open-ended as to what our shared definition of success is. But I think it's about, a lot of us have come to the same conclusion, harder to measure, of course, but it's the sense of agency.
Mhm.
We want to instill a sense of agency in more people because that sense of agency gives people purpose. It gives them permission.
Mhm.
It's the initial permission slip, but then they realize that they're allowed to write their own permission slips for understanding something, for learning something new, for
Right.
building a business, making a product, doing whatever it may be that interests them. But it's really to instill that sense of agency that you're the person who can write your own permission slip. You don't need someone else to do it for you.
Okay. So to be as clear as possible, I think a lot of people have heard about a sense of agency. I want to throw out a definition um, that I understand and see if that's aligned with yours or
Mhm.
slightly different. Personal agency is an internal belief for a particular situation or context that they can affect or shape the outcome of that situation. Personal agency does not always need to be accurate. If I believe I can walk through the wall behind you with the studs, um, that is probably a false belief, but I feel very empowered. This is kind of extreme. But if you take it to a skill set that you know nothing about, a tool that you're about to pick up, or a situation that you need to have some tools and they're not yet identified, having a belief in that context that you can then go through those steps of identifying the tools or things that you need to gather,
Mhm.
educating yourself on those things, and then moving forward to impact or influence that outcome. That's just kind of my definition
Mhm.
of personal agency, that it shifts in different contexts, but it is a internal belief that you have that effect.
Mhm.
What is yours?
Um, so before we started working on this project, I almost never used the term agency.
Okay.
I think it's fairly synonymous with what I've used in the past, but I've always looked towards, once I came across this term called an autodidact or autodidactic, it just means self-taught. And if you're self-taught, you have a high sense of agency because you're not intimidated by the unknown. You're willing to step into something
Mhm.
even though you don't know what's behind that wall. You're willing to run into that wall because you think you can get through it.
Right.
And, we could work on a structure that allows you to run through that wall,
Mhm.
but it's just a matter of understanding, okay, how's the wall built?
Okay.
Where's the weak spot on the wall? Do you need to put a helmet on? Like there's all these things in there, but if you set that goal, say I want to run through the wall,
Right.
then it's just a matter of, okay, well, what does it take to do that? May sound absurd and
Mhm.
crazy that you want to do it in the first place, but it's something that is possible. And it's just you being able to convince yourself that the outcome, the thing that I'm setting a goal for,
Mhm.
is possible in the first place. Because if you enter with that understanding that it's possible,
Mhm.
even if it's nearly impossible,
Mhm.
you're going to be able to step in. You're going to be able to identify what you don't know. You're going to be able to come up with different resources or identify different resources that help you understand to learn the things you didn't know in the first place. And you have you have no fear or very minimal fear of failing.
When you have a sense of personal agency, that directly displaces fear.
Yes.
Okay. Question for you. If we go back to that circle, so you were talking about a fab lab with a breadth of tools,
Hmm.
woodworking, metalworking, kind of that circle, and a person's parachuting into the middle of it, and
Hmm.
then they self-attract to a particular tool or process.
Hmm.
Um, and then we think, based on the observation, that they end up jumping around the circle, but they end up checking off everything, because usually a workflow or a learn flow is inherent.
Hmm.
Once you pick up one thing, you go somewhere else. So my question is, person parachutes in, and in your context, and definitely what we're doing at ASC, is having something akin to a shop steward,
Hmm.
um, is asking an expert for specific information part of the
Autodidactic.
autodidactic process.
Hmm. Very much so.
Okay.
And it's one, a willingness to say, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and then the ability to find the answer. Um, and so yes, the idea of someone parachuting in, many times within the Fab Labs, like we would give tours. So there's a bunch of kids from the high schools that are showing up at the community college to look around and see what the college has to offer, to hopefully get them excited about saying, ooh, this is interesting and I want to come back. We would do the same thing with the Fab Lab and say, here's the Fab Lab. It works a little different from the rest of the programs and departments you've seen. So there's skills in which I had to really get good at, which is I had a phenomenal song and dance.
Mm-hmm.
My job is to get people excited, to feel excited, to show them things that inspire them and say, wow, that is amazing. And I can do that too. And it's even better, works even better if you have people in those spaces doing things already,
Mm-hmm.
because then then the outsider who's never seen this place before can look around and be like, well, what's that? That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then also show up and ask them a question
Mm-hmm.
and realize that, wait a minute, 2 weeks ago, I've never touched a machine like this in my life.
Yeah, I think
And
that's always a
and
surprise.
now I'm doing and now I'm doing hard technical work with this machine.
Yeah.
And then realizing that, wait a minute, so you didn't have to go to school to learn how to use a 3D printer first to start using 3D printer? It's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
And for myself, when I started this work, the first school that I convinced to do this, I got them to buy me a 3D printer. I'd never touched one in my life. I've worked with lots of tools, but I'd never touched a 3D printer in my life. But I said, yeah, we're going to buy one of these things and I'll figure it out. And then I'm going to bring it back to the school and then I'm going to show you how to do it. And then I'm going to show the students how to do it. And then was able to parlay that into a CNC machine, into a laser cutter, into a whatever. Like I'd never worked with any of these things myself, but I knew that there was a lot of value there. I got excited by the potential outcome there. And then used my autodidactic nature to then learn the next step and the next step and the next step. And then for me, where I really ended up finding my true value
Mm-hmm.
is in the hard work to getting to that stage where it allows that place to be used as a platform for people to show up and get inspired. Dealing with the budgeting, dealing with the bureaucracy, dealing with all the logistics leading up to it, because I found my ability to create impact
Mm-hmm.
was best done there, because then the stage gets built and it exists and it can live on past me and then inspire the people. But getting past those first hurdles are some of the most difficult work. Like, I initially entered with this work myself with a big self-interest, because I wanted all these things to use myself. I wanted $500,000 in equipment that I didn't have to pay for.
Yes.
That was part of my initial motivation. It's like, well, I'm going to get them to buy them, and then I get the keys, and I don't need to own the thing if I've got the keys. But over time, what happens is I have less and less time myself to do those things, but I find the joy in the hard work of the autodidactic nature of, okay, well, we got to build and design the thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And then coming across new challenges that I've never dealt with, because I'm dealing with this organization over here, or there's bigger limitations on the facilities over here, or there's a smaller budget, or whatever it may be. Those are new problems that arise. But it's this idea that, like, but if you just get started,
Mm-hmm.
then you can figure out what you don't know.
Yeah.
And then you go figure out what you need to know, and then you can apply that and achieve the thing, even if you do it poorly the first time or the first 10 times. But if you don't do it initially, you're never going to get to the finish line.
Yeah. I feel that kind of what you're describing, outside of building the next organization, is We started with the 3D printer so
Mhm.
you can use it. Very selfish, makes you smile. And there's nothing wrong with that. When I built my school, it's just because it's the thing that made me smile.
Mhm.
And what we're doing at ASC is this is what makes us smile. Um, but it sure as heck impacts a lot of people. And so I envisioned there might have been a day that you were spending more and more time in the office, more spreadsheets, more paperwork, and then you come out maybe a little bit exhausted, and that you see and hear a joyous noise because there are 20 people in
Mhm.
the room using the 20 different machines that have all um, popped up. Is there a moment like that that you recall?
Definitely. Yeah, and that's really what keeps me going, because if I
Yeah,
just keep my head buried in a laptop all day long, I don't get to see the value and the impact of the work I'm putting out there. And so, yes, if I need to recharge, I just go wander the floor and be like, "Oh, what are you working on over there? Oh, that's interesting. Hey,
yeah,
did you know you could do it this way instead?
yeah,
Hey, did you know they're working on something similar over there? Go talk to them." Because
yeah.
and that's and that brings me a lot of joy. The universe is very connected for me.
Yeah,
So in a conversation we have, I'm like, "Oh, do you know Fred? If you don't know Fred, let me introduce you to Fred,
yeah.
because you're going to get really excited by what he has to say."
It's also the people connections. And then in the past, when I've been in different maker spaces, I've enjoyed being a curator of people, right? And you see somebody in that space over there doing something, and you have a background on this person, and you say, you know what? You would really
Mhm.
benefit from starting a conversation over there, and then sometimes physically bringing them together or suggesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, that can be really exciting. I wanted to shift a little bit more towards we've got in ASC, we're definitely building out several different things. Workforce development, something we've invented called pre-workforce development, and we think it's the right environment to start looking at that. We're doing field trips of elevated depth and complexity that are 3 hours long and lowering the age at which some of these concepts are approached. We're a regional first support center and also hosting a very large first robotics team in our space, but generally the space is to support the center. We're building out a lot of other resources. We're looking at corporate team building, things like that, that
Mhm.
we're trying to answer these questions on. But those first three are very, very core to what we're doing. I'm wondering if you can unpack for us a little bit about the thing that we're inventing.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the thing I've done most.
Hmm.
Um, and the thing that really gets me motivated the most is the pre-workforce. I think the official term is pre-apprenticeship. Um, and so the reason why workforce development ever came into my vernacular in the first place was because I worked at community colleges where they're teaching technical vocational skills to then be applied, turn around, apply it to the real world and go get a job.
Right.
Um, that economic motivation motivates a lot of people because everyone has bills to pay. Um, and what we're looking at with the pre-workforce or pre-apprenticeship stuff is the goal there is not deep, hard technical skills that make you employable in that moment. They can be, but the goal is to ignite this interest, desire, this agency or autodidactic nature. Because once that part happens, that person doesn't really need a teacher. They
Hmm.
don't need someone to tell them what to do next. You can continue to curate experiences for them, put them in the right room, bring in, interesting folks, have interesting events, things like that. But that person that once they're ignited, they don't need you to tell them what to do anymore.
I think there's a very strong parallel to what I've been learning about FIRST Robotics. I've had almost no experience up until a few months ago with FIRST Robotics, and there's a FIRST Robotics team, the Howdy Bots in ASC, and they're supporting kind of that regional area for all the other teams. Um, but I remember, I think this was three months ago, going down to Lhasa, which is a high school here, and not going for a competition, but just to kind of observe the team after school in action. And I went in the room, pardon me, and sat down in a corner quietly and observed um, a really wonderful, um, just jaw dropping scene
Hmm.
with different groups of students, maybe 3 or 4 each. Some of them were getting better at driving the robots for the competition that I think it was the week after in Houston. Some of them were working on the code to update. Some of them were working on the marketing. Some of them were working to start a summer camp. And I saw a complete organization. I saw this organization strongly student-led. But I saw these mentors, and they weren't teaching, but they weren't doing the thing where you just watch the student and wait for them to ask a question. They were doing this middle thing, which is mentorship. So they would have an opinion on how to build a part or solve a challenge. So they weren't withholding everything and letting the student explore. And they weren't in charge. And I think what I'm hearing from you is kind of that parallel, or that middle ground, is it?
Yeah. Yeah. I personally think that the role of a good mentor is not to have good answers. It's to ask good questions.
Yeah.
Because you want to extract the information and the knowledge out of someone else. You want their brain to fry from having to compute the information you're giving them to then be like, oh, okay, yeah, actually, I should do it this way because it won't break. I'm like, oh, okay. So I asked you the right question that gets you to come up with the right answer yourself.
I see actually a little bit of a difference between those two. What you're describing, it sounds a couple degrees more of intentionally questioning and getting the student to come to a place, which I think is completely valid. And then first, what I'm seeing is slightly different in that the mentor might say, well, let me just tell you about this tool or workflow. But then sometimes also going back to asking questions. And so they would kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, there's kind of two parts of that. One is there is a certain amount of teaching that you're doing as a mentor when it comes to safety.
Right.
So, I'm not going to say there's a saw over there. Go figure out how to turn it on and how to use it safely.
Yeah.
That requires the teaching part. I need to unpack this for you. Make sure you do this part right. That's where I'm teaching. But then after that, now that you know how to do it safely, what you do with it is up to you.
Yeah.
How you will use the tool is up to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where the first part, when it helps, you're helping people understand what tools do.
Yeah. What parts of what we're calling pre-workforce are we actually proposing or inventing at ASC? How do we want to see the state program definitions change as a result of success at ASC?
So, my perspective is limited in some regards. So there may be other pieces that I'm not aware of that I'm blind to.
Right.
But my general take on what pre-apprenticeship training is you enter a predefined pre-apprenticeship program. There's a linear path laid out in front of you. The goal here is to do all the soft skills development, enough hard skills so that you at least understand the nature of the future role you may have, and then get you primed and ready to go plug into something hard and technical that has a very explicit linear path laid out with it. And, one of the things that I looked at when I started talking to folks about pre-apprenticeship training here in Texas is, the way it works is if you want to do pre-apprenticeship, you want to go receive a grant for pre-apprenticeship training, then you have to show that you have one agreement with one apprenticeship program. So there's one pathway that you have to connect with. And you also have to have, I think it was greater than 50%, maybe a 60% placement in order for you to get funding next year. And one of the biggest problems I've seen with workforce development pre-apprenticeship programs in the past is that it turns into a game for the institution. The goal is to get enough people in the pipeline so that you get enough people finishing the program and achieving the goal you set out for them in order for you to get your funding. And when it turns into that game, it's no longer about, is this best for this person? Is this the right fit for this person? It's like, well, we had a hard time. We needed 25 and we got 26. So we kind of just said yes to anybody who walked in the door.
Mhm.
because we needed to hit the numbers to begin the program.
Right.
And my knee-jerk reaction was, okay, well, I actually want to work with these same institutions with state funding, et cetera, because I want to show them that we could take their money, we can achieve their goals and do it in a different way, and likely, hopefully, have a higher level of achievement than other programs.
So describe that way.
Yeah. So my approach immediately was, I have no interest in developing one pathway and one agreement with one apprenticeship program. I want to go find 15 that all have a similar general skill set that apply to all of them. I'm not going to necessarily create an apprenticeship program for a nursing program, because we're not doing a lot of nursing related activities. But we can say, okay, we've got machinists, we've got HVAC techs, we got electricians, we got plumbers, we got carpenters, we've got, sheet metal workers, etc. All of these are just using tools. You're likely getting dirty. You're likely using your hands. There's some level of computer design that's going into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're looking at building a pre-apprenticeship program that really encompasses a large number of agreements, so that when we bring somebody in, I don't have to be explicit and say, I'm looking for people that are only interested in becoming machinists. I can say, I'm interested in people, I'm looking for people that are interested in working with tools. Great. That's who we recruit for. And then our job and our goal at that point then is to get them excited about the different opportunities, give them a good appetizer into this version,
Mm-hmm.
this version, this version, this version, etc. And then, as long as I get them excited, as long as I ignite that and build that sense of agency for that individual,
Right.
now they have multiple pathways in front of them, and they can choose to gravitate towards the one that actually appeals to them the most.
And to be clear, we're presenting them with a range of opportunities and places to start.
Mhm.
Um, I was just thinking though, with that word ignite, we're not doing the ignition. We're sending out the tinder, but the spark comes from their choice to start in a
Yes.
certain place.
We're,
Okay.
we're creating the environment where they're much more likely to get ignited.
Okay.
And really, with that perspective, is that, yeah, we still have, I need to teach you how to use this tool safely. I need to teach you how to use this tool safely. Part of what I want to do is then present you with, hey, see that machine over there? Here's 40 different things that have been made with that machine.
Yep.
The goal is to create such a diversity there where someone's like, wow, that's not cool, but this thing over here, that's cool. And then for the next person, it's like, that thing's boring to me, but this one over here, that's really cool.
Yeah.
And just show them that these tools have some universal appeal to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just up to us to kind of put them in the right environment,
Right.
give them the right exposure to get them to see that themselves. And so within a pre-apprenticeship program, we're going through the same kind of boot camp. Okay, here's how we're going to work in the space. Here are the expectations that we have on you. One major problem that many of these programs have is that people don't like to complete. Sometimes they have a hard time showing up. And I get when people have all kinds of stresses and things in their lives that actually prevent them from being as successful as they want to be. But when we create an environment that is really engaging, really exciting, we're going to flip that script. We're gonna have people that don't want to go home. I've built multiple environments where people just don't want to go home anymore because they're so excited to be here.
In the maker spaces and schools that I've built, that is the most exciting thing, when you want to leave, but the people in the space don't want to leave.
Mm-hmm.
That's why at Driven, I ended up last year going, I'm just going to give keys to the parents so I can go home, because sometimes they don't want to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's awesome. So we wanted to talk about kind of the origin of ASC, and then a little bit about your own origin story. I want to get specific on when we're talking about the problems that we're trying to solve. Earlier, we were talking about what should the programs at ASC look like, and we've largely been given by Peter an opportunity to solve for bringing in the most interesting and passionate people and see what their bringing to the table. So you have Evan Marchman with the team he started 10 years ago in his garage, and that's the thing that he's bringing is support for Area First. You're coming from a Fab Lab background, and you're looking at that really maps to pre-apprenticeship
Mm-hmm.
in sorry, or pre-workforce, correct? Pre-workforce. And then I'm coming from the makerspace background in schools, and then looking at how we can, at least in my own school, blur the lines between community and school and have interesting people in the space. Um, what do you see as some of the other opportunities for us that you're excited for
Mm-hmm.
with ASC?
Um, there are obviously those programs that we've developed currently, but we've talked about the executive ed and team building stuff, and you know some of that is driven by the desire to bring money in, because one, adults and professionals and corporations have a lot more money to spend than most of the kids that we're actually trying to support in the first place.
Right.
And it's a really hard business model to say we're just going to serve everyone who can't afford it, because that's what we should do. Because then it's on our shoulders to go raise money everywhere else in order to do that. Within like the team building perspective, many of the activities that we have, 10 and 15-year-old kids doing can be replicated for the adults, because they don't usually get that same level of experience in their professions. And so one, it's kind of selfishness that it can drive revenue, but it's also another direct way to bring in interesting adults into the space. And we're looking at large corporations like Dell and Google and IBM and corporations like that have really smart people that work there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get 2 or 3 of those to be like, this place was really interesting, this was really fun, well, here's an opportunity for mentorship for the first team. You want to sign up for one of those things. You want to come propose some really interesting project to us. You just have a thing that you don't have space to build, but you need a place to do it in. As long as you're willing to put it on display and you're not trying to hide it under lock and key, like, we can make space for those kind of opportunities, because everyone else is going to benefit from that smart person doing an interesting thing in the space.
Yes. I think also I'm very interested in having that 10 or 15-year-old, when it's possible, lead the same activity for the adults.
Very much so.
Um,
I mean, baked into the cake, into the pre-apprenticeship program that I've defined, which likely will evolve, but is just that,
Yeah.
is they're working to develop the programming that gets applied in the space. And then part of that program is to actually then implement it and lead it.
Yeah.
And that, for me, it's modeled after a program I did in the Fab Labs, where we had student technicians, and they were just eager students who likely didn't want to go home, where we're able to say, okay, well, we're going to pay you now to stick around and help other people do these things. And, we knew that they were going to get some deep technical skills, because they're using the machines more than most people are. So they're getting in there, then they're having to troubleshoot. They end up repairing the machines. They're teaching someone else how to use the thing. They run into a new problem, they're going to learn those skills. But the greatest value that came out of that experience for those students specifically was the soft skills development, which was nothing that I had ever planned for. But because when you're giving a training, and they're small groups, you're 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, or if you're leading a tour, you might have 20 people. Your presentation skills have to get honed. Your ability to use analogies have to get honed. Your ability to read people's body language gets honed, because now I need to see, oh, wait, there's a blank stare. This person's not getting it. So I've got to come up with 6 other ways until I'm like, oh, that was the right analogy that got you to say, now I get it. Now I understand. And then you also have to get very comfortable with saying, I don't know.
Yep.
And you sit with that feeling of being uncomfortable, which I think is a good thing, but also that motivates you to not be in that position again. So now I have to figure that out. So then the next time I train and someone asks me that same question that I didn't get before, I have an answer for them now.
Right. Yeah.
And really kind of pushes them to then in that position of like, okay, now my part of my job is to just continually develop.
Right. That's that. It's that personal growth. I wanted to end on, we were discussing just before the recording here, what's kind of a fun or engaging question to ask in the end. And what we determined was It'd be fun to ask each other, is there a particular book or tool or resource that you're currently very
Mhm.
excited about?
Well, I think I'll flip it back to you because I've talked a lot. So you can answer first, and then I'll answer after that.
Okay. Well, we're going to be having some conversations coming up. I brought a few of my favorite things at this table. I would say in this context, the thing that I'll pull out of the pile here is uh, Daniel Schiffman's The Nature of Code. Um, this is for um, a computer programming language that's extremely accessible. And it starts with some vector math, which is something that you don't normally get to until high school, and goes all the way through machine learning. It's able to quickly explore modeling nature. So the nature of code, there are a lot of natural processes
Mhm.
like two body and three body problems that I'm just stunned at how accessible this is.
Mhm.
It's a book that brings a lot of high school and college concepts down to somebody who has a computer and they're 10 years old and they just have this book. So super excited about
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, and I think for me, you know, leading up to this moment, there have been many tools where I'm like, "That's the one. That one's so much fun," and
Yeah.
you know, but there's a book that I've been reading for 6+ months now because I don't get around to it often enough. But the concepts in it completely make my brain think differently. It's the Body Electric by Robert O. Becker. And I think his first version of this book was written in the 70s. And I think this latest version I'm reading was updated in the early 2000s. And it actually paints a very interesting picture. I go against the grain on almost everything in life. I don't accept what is given to me or what is told to me. I want to decode and understand, but it talks about the idea of being an electrical system, the idea of the body being an electrical system, and actually talks about electrical charge being the most valuable thing. And the more data and research that comes around, it's like you get that from breathing. You can get some level of nutrition by breathing,
Hmm.
by breath work, by the water itself. So if you've got poor quality water, it's got a poor charge to it, which is actually a positive charge is bad and a negative charge is good. But if it's got a positive charge, then it's actually not supporting your body in the first place. Your cells actually have amperage associated with them. And if you don't have the right amperage in the cell, you're not healthy. And so it kind of talks about all these things, and it really like just helped my brain. Like, okay, now let me look back at the world and like, okay, well, you got this idea of homeopathics. It's kind of an abstract idea for mainstream science to say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, how's the essence of something that's been diluted 10,000 times down to just water?
Mm-hmm.
How does that have any value? Well, it's the electrical charge associated with it, or the potential for different therapeutics, health things, vitamins. It's not actually the vitamin. It's either the frequency and or the electrical charge that's associated with that actually brings the healing and health to your body in the first place. And so it's not about the physical thing. It's about its current status of charge or frequency to it. And so this is a book that's very very technical. Like a lot of things that I read are over my head, but they'll be less over my head the more I explore them.
Okay.
And so I just like to kind of dive into these topics and understand, because one of the greatest things in there that it begins to explain is this: we're looking at the idea of regenerating limbs,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taking the salamander, which
Mm-hmm.
has the ability to regenerate all of its limbs,
Mm-hmm.
and and looking at kind of the electrical nature of that, and why can salamanders do it but humans can't. And part of the thesis in the book is saying humans can. It's just we don't have the right electrical charge and the right understanding of the body to be able to do that in the first place. So not that people are actively regrowing limbs right now, but it's really saying, but if it's possible here in nature, it could be possible elsewhere as well.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. And at the High Cam studio here, while we're building out ASC,
Mhm.
I think we're going to be having some more conversations in the future with other interesting people, and probably have a lot more for us to unpack between ourselves too to
Mhm.
share out. So excellent.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.